The champagne reception at the Adebayo Holdings penthouse glittered like a constellation brought to earth. Harry adjusted his custom-tailored Tom Ford suit, still unaccustomed to the weight of designer fabric against his skin. Around him, Lagos's elite mingled. Women in flowing Lanre da Silva Ajayi gowns that swept marble floors like liquid silk. Men in sharp Ermenegildo Zegna suits, wielding influence like familiar accessories. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across faces that had never known struggle, their laughter tinkling with the same artificial brightness as their champagne flutes. Angeline stood across the marble expanse, resplendent in an emerald silk dress that caught every light, her natural hair styled in an elegant crown of braids interwoven with gold thread. She commanded the room with effortless grace, introducing Harry to board members whose net worth could fund small nations, investors who measured success in billions, not millions. As his fiancée introduced him with visible pride, Harry felt the subtle shift in their eyes, curiosity mixed with thinly veiled skepticism, assessment wrapped in polite smiles. He wasn't born into this world of private jets and offshore accounts, hadn't attended the right schools, or belonged to the exclusive clubs where deals were sealed over cigars and aged scotch. He had earned his place through merit, through blood and sweat and relentless determination. Yet whispers followed him like persistent shadows. The man she rescued, they murmured behind crystal glasses, voices pitched just loud enough for him to catch fragments. The consultant who got lucky. That night, as city lights sprawled beneath their floor-to-ceiling windows like fallen stars, Angeline found him on the balcony, tension rigid in his shoulders, his untouched champagne growing warm in his grip. The cool night breeze carried the distant sounds of Lagos, car horns, street vendors, the eternal pulse of ambition. "They'll never see me as your equal," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of 100 subtle slights. She slipped, her hand into his, her skin warm against his cool palm, her grip fierce and unwavering. "Then we'll prove them wrong. Together," she whispered, her determination burning brighter than all the diamonds in that glittering room. Tobena Okafor wasn't accustomed to losing, not business deals, not competitions, and certainly not women who caught his interest. The 34-year-old heir to Okafor Industries had built his reputation on hostile takeovers and ruthless negotiations, his presence in boardrooms as commanding as the Patek Philippe watch glinting on his wrist, a trophy of countless corporate victories. His Instagram showcased a life of calculated perfection, yacht parties in Santorini, front-row seats at Paris Fashion Week, beautiful women who never lasted beyond a season. When news broke of Angeline's engagement to a nobody consultant, someone who hadn't even attended Ivy League schools or belonged to Lagos's old money families, Tobena saw opportunity gleaming like fool's gold. At an exclusive Ikoyi lounge, where bottle service started at hundreds of thousands of naira and pulsing Afro beats shook crystal glasses, he approached Harry with predatory charm. "So you're the man who captured the uncatchable Angeline Adebayo," Tobena said smoothly, his designer stubble perfectly groomed, his cologne expensive enough to make a statement without overwhelming. "Impressive. Though I wonder," he paused, swirling aged whiskey in his glass, "does she know you're drowning in her world?" His words, wrapped in false camaraderie and practiced concern, planted seeds of doubt with surgical precision. He, Punz, mentioned failed ventures of other men who dated powerful women, their masculinity eroded by dependence, their identities swallowed by their partner's success. That weekend, Tobena escalated his psychological warfare. He appeared at their favorite rooftop restaurant, coincidentally dining with mutual business contacts, his female companion, a stunning model draped in Versace whose beauty stopped conversations, laughing too loudly at his jokes, touching his arm with practiced affection. But his true weapon came through a carefully leaked business proposal, one that painted Harry as Angeline's professional liability, a consultant whose recent success was entirely manufactured by his fiancé's influence, suggesting her company's board should protect her from emotional decisions that could damage shareholder value. The document, anonymous yet devastating, circulated through their social circles like wildfire, shared in WhatsApp groups and whispered in executive lounges. The article appeared in a prominent business blog on a humid Tuesday morning. Its headline designed to wound Adebayo's new acquisition, love or strategic partnership. It dissected their relationship with surgical precision, questioning whether Harry's consulting victories were genuine achievements or elaborate theater orchestrated by a billionaire playing Pygmalion with her pet project. The writer, hiding behind journalistic objectivity, suggested Angeline's engagement was either a publicity stunt or proof that even brilliant women made foolish choices when lonely. They quoted anonymous sources close to the couple, expressing concern, published side-by-side photos. Harry's modest apartment before meeting Angeline, juxtaposed with images of him at elite events in designer suits. Harry's phone exploded with messages, some supportive from real friends, many condescending from old colleagues who had abandoned him after the restaurant incident, now crawling out with fake concern, their pity more insulting than their previous rejection. At a rooftop brunch in Banana Island, where mimosas flowed freely and Lagos's young elite gathered in their weekend finest, women in bold prints and statement jewelry, men in carefully casual designer streetwear, the tension became unbearable. A young entrepreneur in a boldly patterned Ankara blazer, his success funded by family money he pretended he'd earned himself, made a careless joke that landed like a slap. "So, Harry, when's Angeline promoting you to co-CEO? Or are you keeping the consultant title for appearances?" Laughter rippled through the group, light and thoughtless, the kind of casual cruelty that privilege breeds. But Harry saw Angeline's face tighten imperceptibly, her smile becoming a beautiful mask, her champagne glass gripped too tightly. Later, in the car, her sleek Mercedes gliding through Lagos traffic with the kind of smoothness his old Toyota had never managed, silence stretched between them like cracked glass, each afraid to speak first and shatter what remained. "You didn't defend me," Harry said finally, his voice carefully neutral, though his hands trembled slightly in his lap. Angeline's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel, her perfect manicure pressing into leather. "Because defending you would prove their point, that you need my protection," she replied, her voice breaking on the last word. Harry threw himself into work with obsessive intensity, determined to silence critics through undeniable achievement that couldn't be attributed to his fiancé's influence. He took on a complex project, restructuring a failing tech startup, whose innovative app had brilliant potential but catastrophic management, without using Angeline's connections, resources, or even mentioning her name in pitches. 18-hour days became routine, fueled by premium coffee that barely kept exhaustion at bay, and wounded pride that burned hotter than ambition. He analyzed market data until his eyes blurred, rebuilt their entire business model from foundation to execution, pitched investors with desperate eloquence. His custom suits began to hang loose on his frame, his face gaunt from skipped meals, his eyes hollow with exhaustion that no amount of sleep could cure. Angeline watched helplessly as the man she loved built walls between them, brick by brick, shutting her out every time she tried to help or even just comfort him after another grueling day. Meanwhile, Tobena tightened his noose with the patience of a python. He quietly acquired the failing startup Harry was consulting for, using shell companies to hide his involvement until the deal was irreversible, effectively becoming Harry's employer overnight. The power dynamic shifted dangerously, and Tobena savored the exquisite irony. In a sleek Lecky conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lagos's chaotic beauty, Tobena delivered his terms with silky menace, his fingers steepled, like a movie villain who'd studied his craft. "Impressive work, Harry. Your restructuring plan is brilliant. Genuinely brilliant. I'm offering you a permanent position as Chief Strategy Officer. Triple your current rate. Full autonomy. Stock. Options that'll make you independently wealthy within 5 years. But there's one non-negotiable condition." He paused, letting anticipation build, watching Harry's face carefully. "End your engagement to Angeline. This isn't personal. It's business. Your relationship is a distraction, undermining both your credibility and hers. The board won't take you seriously as long as you're seen as her accessory, and she'll always be questioned for mixing business with pleasure." Harry's jaw clenched so hard it ached, his hands fisting under the table. "You can't be serious." Tobena leaned back in his leather chair, his Cartier cufflinks catching afternoon light, his expression almost sympathetic. "I'm very serious. Choose your pride and career independence, or playing prince consort to Lagos's queen for the rest of your life. You have 1 week to decide." Angeline had built her empire through calculated risks and ruthless pragmatism, never allowing emotion to cloud judgment or sentimentality to soften necessary decisions. She'd fired loyal executives when performance slipped, walked away from friendships that became liabilities, sacrificed relationships on the altar of ambition without looking back. Her father had taught her that power demanded constant vigilance, that showing weakness invited destruction in the corporate jungle, where predators circled endlessly. But Harry had shattered that discipline completely, cracked the armor she'd spent decades forging, made her feel things she'd convinced herself were luxuries successful women couldn't afford. Unable to watch him suffer, to see the light dimming in his eyes or feel the growing distance between them like physical cold, she made a decision that horrified her executive team and sent shockwaves through Lagos's business community. At a private dinner in her penthouse, just the two of them, no staff hovering, no pretense or performance, she laid bare her plan with trembling hands that betrayed her calm voice. "I'm temporarily stepping down from my CEO position at Adebayo Holdings," she announced, sliding a formal document across the table. "Operations will go to Kioma, my COO. She's ready, more than ready, actually. I've been grooming her for this possibility for 2 years." Harry stared, his fork frozen mid-air, jollof rice cooling on the tines. "What? Angeline? Why?" His voice cracked with confusion and something like fear. "Because this empire means nothing if it costs me you. We're going to start over, Harry. No wealth, no influence, no safety nets or family connections. Just us, building something together from the ground up, proving we can succeed without my last name opening doors." She had already purchased a modest duplex in a middle-class Surulere neighborhood. Far from Banana Island's gated luxury, had already leased a small office space above a bustling electronics shop, and drafted a business proposal for a joint consulting firm where they'd be equal partners in every sense. Harry's eyes welled with tears he didn't bother hiding. "Angeline, you can't abandon everything you've built, decades of work, for me. What if I'm not worth it?" She reached across the table, gripping his hands fiercely enough to hurt. "You risked your career for a stranger once. Lost everything for doing the right thing. Let me risk my comfort for the man I love, for the life I actually want, instead of the one I was taught to want. Their new life began in shocking simplicity that felt both liberating and terrifying. The Surulere duplex, while comfortable with its modest 3 bedrooms and small garden, felt claustrophobic compared to Angeline's sprawling penthouse with its infinity pool and panoramic views. No marble countertops imported from Italy, no smart home systems responding to voice commands, no housekeepers materializing silently to anticipate needs before they arose. Just 2 people navigating a normal life, microwaving leftovers when too tired to cook, washing their own dishes, discovering each other in mundane, profound ways that wealth had obscured. Angeline learned to navigate Danfo buses during rush hour, her designer bags replaced by practical leather totes that wouldn't attract thieves, her heels traded for comfortable flats that could handle Lagos's broken sidewalks. Harry taught her to haggle at local markets, laughing as vendors initially quoted her tourist prices until her Yoruba, rusty but authentic, emerged with indignant flair that made them grin and concede defeat. Their consulting firm, aptly named New Dawn Strategies, operated from a cramped office above a bustling electronics shop where the owner's teenage son blasted hip-hop at volumes that made concentration challenging. The ambient noise, hawkers shouting their wares, generators rumbling through power outages, the chaotic symphony of Lagos hustle that never slept, became their soundtrack, replacing elevator music and air-conditioned silence. They took on small businesses initially, a struggling fashion boutique in Yaba whose owner had talent but no business sense, a family restaurant in Ikeja hemorrhaging money despite delicious food, a promising beauty line lacking marketing expertise, but bursting with innovative products. The work was grinding, unglamorous, requiring them to get their hands dirty in ways Angeline's previous life never demanded. Slowly, methodically, through late nights and early mornings, through failures that taught hard lessons and small victories that felt monumental, their reputation grew not through connections or family names, but through undeniable results that clients could measure in increased revenue and transformed businesses. Harry watched Angeline transform from corporate queen to scrappy entrepreneur, her armor melting to reveal fierce creativity and surprising adaptability. She coded websites late into the night, designed social media campaigns with viral potential, even helped paint a client's storefront in vibrant colors, her laughter ringing out pure and unfiltered. Tobena watched their descent into what he considered mediocrity, with growing confusion that kept him awake at night. His sources, and he maintained sources everywhere money could buy loyalty, reported Angeline's shocking abdication. Their modest lifestyle, their relentless work ethic that somehow seemed more energized than exhausted. He had expected Harry to crumble without Angeline's empire propping him up, for her to return defeated within months, realizing that love couldn't pay bills or maintain status. Instead, they thrived in ways his spreadsheets couldn't measure and his analysts couldn't quantify, their social media showing genuine smiles rather than the practiced happiness of his own curated feed. At a highball networking event in Victoria Island, where Lagos's power players gathered to make deals and show off their latest acquisitions, Tobena encountered Harry unexpectedly near the bar. Harry wore an off-the-rack suit from a local tailor, confident despite its humble origins, his handshake firm and unburdened by the desperation Tobena had anticipated seeing. "Tobena," he greeted evenly. No hostility, no bravado, just calm acknowledgement. "I never gave you an answer to your ultimatum." Tobena's smile was practiced, his voice smooth as the whiskey in his glass. "I assumed your choice was clear when you walked away from my offer, without a word." Harry's eyes held something Tobena couldn't quite identify. Not pity, But perhaps, understanding, that felt more devastating than contempt. It was clear. I choose both my pride and Angeline. Turns out, I never had to sacrifice either. Your premise was flawed, that I needed your wealth or her empire to be valuable. I just needed to believe in myself. Something in Tobena cracked in that moment. Not jealousy exactly, but recognition that pierced his carefully constructed defenses. He had spent decades accumulating power, building an empire that commanded respect and fear in equal measure, yet remained profoundly alone in his glass tower. His relationships were transactional ledgers, his victories hollow achievements celebrated with people who'd abandon him the moment his fortune faltered. Meanwhile, this man in his modest suit radiated a wealth Tobena's billions couldn't purchase. Genuine partnership, earned respect, transformative love that made everything else feel secondary. For the first time in his calculated life, staring at Harry's peaceful expression, Tobena felt the crushing weight of his own emptiness, the hollow echo of a life lived for appearances rather than meaning. Just as their new life found comfortable rhythm, when their business was stabilizing and their relationship healing from wounds both inflicted and received, the past resurfaced with violent force that shattered their hard-won peace. The two men who had harassed Angeline that fateful restaurant night, the catalyst that had set everything in motion, whose actions had destroyed and ultimately rebuilt their lives, were released from prison after serving only 18 months of 5-year sentences, their freedom purchased through suspiciously shortened sentences and legal maneuvering that reeked of bribed judges and influenced officials. They hadn't forgotten the woman who'd pressed charges with relentless determination, or the man who had intervened and turned their evening of cruel entertainment into a nightmare of legal consequences and public humiliation. Angeline received the first threat via encrypted message that bypassed her phone's security. A photo of her new Surulera duplex taken from across the street, showing their bedroom window, followed by a simple text that made her blood run cold. "We know where you sleep now, princess. No bodyguards this time." Harry's blood ran cold when she showed him, his hands trembling slightly as he zoomed in on the photo, noting the angle, the timestamp, the deliberate intimacy of the invasion. Without her previous security detail, the armed guards, the panic buttons, the fortress of wealth that had surrounded her like an invisible shield. They were vulnerable in ways they'd never considered during their idealistic leap into normal life. The threats escalated with methodical cruelty designed to terrorize. Slashed tires on Harry's car, broken windows at their office with rocks wrapped in threatening messages, menacing phone calls at midnight breathing heavily before disconnecting. The police, overwhelmed and under-resourced in a city with far more crime than officers, offered little help beyond filing reports that disappeared into bureaucratic black holes, their sympathy genuine but ultimately useless. Harry refused to let Angeline return to her protected life, adamant that doing so would validate every critic who claimed their experiment was naive fantasy, proving that people like them couldn't survive without privilege's protective bubble. Instead, swallowing pride that had become his defining characteristic, he did something that cost him more than any previous sacrifice. He reached out to Tobena. In a quiet conversation over premium whiskey at Tobena's waterfront estate, where wealth insulated against Lagos's chaos, Harry laid out the situation with unflinching honesty, his voice steady despite the humiliation burning in his chest. "I need help," he admitted, the words tasting like ash and defeat. Tobena steepled his fingers, studying Harry across the polished mahogany desk with newfound respect that transformed his usually calculating expression into something approaching genuine interest. "You're asking me to help the woman I wanted, to separate you from?" The same woman whose happiness clearly doesn't include me? His tone held no malice, just curiosity about Harry's audacity, about what desperation or strategy drove this unexpected visit. Harry met his gaze steadily, refusing to flinch or look away, despite every instinct screaming that he was exposing weakness to a predator. I'm asking you to be the man you pretend to be at charity galas and philanthropic events. Someone who uses power for something beyond ego and corporate victories that mean nothing beyond quarterly reports. You have resources? I don't. You understand the kind of people we're dealing with because you operate in their world. The challenge landed perfectly, striking Tobena's carefully hidden idealism, the part of him that occasionally wondered if his life amounted to anything beyond accumulation. Within 48 hours, Tobena's security team descended on Surulere like a precisely coordinated military operation, their efficiency both reassuring and slightly terrifying. The two men who'd threatened Angeline found themselves facing not just legal pressure from underpaid public prosecutors, but the kind of comprehensive private investigation that only unlimited resources could fund. Digital forensics tracking, their every communication, financial audits revealing income sources, witnesses suddenly willing to testify, evidence of their shortened sentence, specific bribes paid, judges influenced, paperwork that should have been impossible to access, unraveled, spectacularly under scrutiny backed by lawyers whose hourly rates exceeded most people's monthly salaries. Meanwhile, Tobena did something that shocked Lagos's elite social circles and sparked countless WhatsApp group discussions. He publicly endorsed New Dawn strategies, throwing a launch event at his contemporary art gallery that drew the city's most influential players. When whispers questioned his motives, when people suggested he was making a fool of himself over Angeline, he stated simply with unusual sincerity, "I back excellence wherever I find it, regardless of my personal feelings." Angeline pulled him aside that evening, her emerald gown catching candlelight from dozens of artfully placed installations, her expression unreadable. "Why are you doing this, Tobena? Really?" He looked at her for a long moment, his usual mask, slipping to reveal something vulnerable beneath. "Because watching you two reminded me that winning isn't everything. Sometimes losing leads you exactly where you need to be, facing truths you've been avoiding." His smile held genuine warmth, for perhaps the first time in their years of acquaintance, transformed from corporate rival to something resembling a friend. 6 months into their Surulere chapter, after weathering storms that would have destroyed weaker bonds, Harry planned something Angeline's wealth could never buy. A perfect moment crafted from pure intention rather than expensive coordinators and unlimited budgets. He recruited her sister, Folake, his mother, Mama Ayo, their small circle of real friends, not the corporate acquaintances who'd drifted away or social climbers who'd never cared, but people who loved them without agenda or expectation of benefit. On a Sunday evening, when Lagos's notorious traffic had settled into its evening rhythm, he led her to the modest rooftop of their duplex, claiming he needed help fixing the water tank that had been acting temperamental. But when they emerged into the cooling air, she gasped audibly. The rooftop had been transformed into an intimate garden that took her breath away. Fairy lights crisscrossed overhead like captured stars. Potted plants, borrowed from every neighbor who'd grown fond of the couple, created a lush oasis defying their urban setting, and a single table held not expensive champagne in crystal flutes, but palm wine in traditional calabashes, a tribute to their roots that money couldn't manufacture. "Angeline," Harry began, his voice thick with emotion that he didn't try to hide or control, his hands trembling as he took hers, "you proposed to me in a penthouse overlooking an empire, surrounded by everything money could buy. Tonight I'm proposing in our small corner of the world, with nothing but truth between us and stars above us that belong to no one. He knelt on the concrete rooftop that was slightly cracked and imperfect, producing his grandmother's simple gold ring from his pocket. No diamonds, no ostentatious display, just metal worn smooth by decades of love and loyalty. You didn't need to give up your throne to prove your love, but you did. And in doing so, you showed me that home isn't a place or a tax bracket or a social circle. It's choosing each other every single day through criticism and threats and doubt. Will you marry me? Not Angeline Adebayo, the CEO, not the billionaire heiress, but you, the woman who paints storefronts and haggles for tomatoes and makes me believe in magic I thought only existed in stories. Tears streamed freely down Angeline's face, her careful composure abandoned completely as she dropped to her knees beside him on that humble rooftop. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, Harry. 1,000 times, yes." Around them, their friends emerged from hiding, cheering and crying, their joy echoing across neighboring rooftops, where curious residents peered out to witness love in its purest, most unadorned form. Their wedding became the event of the season, not for its opulence or celebrity guest list, but for its radical authenticity that challenged every expectation of what a billionaire's wedding should be. They chose a venue that embodied their journey, the Surulere Community Hall where they'd hosted their first client workshop, its modest walls holding memories of their rebirth. The space was transformed not through expensive event planners charging obscene fees, but through collective effort. Neighbors contributing decorations, local artists painting murals, community youth setting up chairs and lights with pride and ownership. Angeline wore a breathtaking fusion that stopped breath and sparked tears, a traditional Iro and Buba of hand-dyed adir in deep indigo and white geometric patterns, paired with contemporary tailoring by an emerging designer they'd mentored whose talent had been overlooked by established fashion houses. The craftsmanship rivaled any European couture, the meaning embedded in every stitch more valuable than any price tag. Harry's agbada was richly embroidered with gold thread, forming proverbs in Yoruba, locally sourced from artisans in Osogbo, whose work deserved international recognition, complementing Angeline's ensemble perfectly. No five-star catering with overpriced, mediocre food designed more for Instagram than taste. Instead, their neighborhood came together in an unprecedented display of communal love. Each family contributed dishes in joyful abundance. Massive pots of jollof rice debated passionately for its perfection, pounded yam with egusi soup rich, enough to make guests weep with satisfaction, suya whose spices told stories of generations, chin-chin and puff-puff that disappeared faster than they could be replenished. The guest list shattered every social convention and sparked countless conversations that would ripple through Lagos for months. Yes, board members and billionaires attended in their finest attire, but they sat alongside market vendors in their Sunday best, former clients whose businesses they'd saved, Harry's childhood friends who'd never stopped believing in him, Angeline's loyal housekeepers from her penthouse days who'd treated her with humanity when others saw only status. Tobena arrived without his usual entourage or beautiful companion, visibly moved as he watched the ceremony, his usual armor softened into something vulnerable. The ceremony blended tradition with innovation, elaborate rites performed with genuine reverence rather than performative culture, prayers offered in multiple languages, blessings from elders whose wisdom commanded respect regardless of bank accounts. When the elderly imam and pastor co-officiated, their different faiths united in celebrating love, guests whispered that they were witnessing something transformative, something that Lagos's elite desperately needed to see. Angeline's father, who'd initially resisted her downgrade with patriarchal disappointment and wounded pride, stood with tears streaming as Harry fulfilled every marriage rite with dignity and grace that proved character transcended class. The ID celebration lasted until dawn, Afro beats pulsing through speakers while bodies moved in collective joy that erased barriers of class and status. A year after their Surulere wedding, New Dawn strategies had evolved beyond anyone's projections, including their own ambitious plans. Their client portfolio was remarkably diverse, everyone from street vendors whose businesses quintupled in revenue to tech startups that attracted Silicon Valley investment, each client treated with equal respect and strategic brilliance regardless of their ability to pay premium fees. Their reputation spread through authentic word of mouth rather than expensive marketing, their waiting list growing longer each month with businesses desperate for consultants who actually understood Lagos's unique challenges and opportunities. When Angeline finally returned to Adebayo Holdings after her year away, it wasn't as sole CEO returning to reclaim her throne, but as co-leader alongside Kioma, her brilliant COO, who'd not only maintained operations, but expanded them with fresh vision that proved women lifting women created unstoppable momentum. Together, they restructured the company around inclusive practices that shocked and inspired. Mentorship programs for underprivileged entrepreneurs, offering genuine resources, not just photo opportunities, ethical partnerships that prioritized community impact over maximum profit margins, investments in overlooked sectors that traditional finance ignored. Harry became the company's chief innovation officer, a newly created role focused on identifying and elevating overlooked talent across Lagos and beyond. His own experience of being dismissed and underestimated, making him uniquely qualified to spot potential others missed. Together, they built something unprecedented in Nigeria's corporate landscape, an empire with a conscience, where success was measured not just in quarterly revenue and shareholder value, but in lives changed, communities transformed, and dreams made possible for people who'd been told their aspirations were unrealistic. They split their time intentionally between their modest home in Surulere, where neighbors still borrowed sugar and children played in their yard, and a new penthouse designed with spaces for hosting community events, mentoring sessions, and family gatherings where wealth served purpose beyond display. On their first anniversary, standing on that same rooftop where Harry had proposed under strung lights and borrowed plants, Angeline pulled him close as the sun set over Lagos's chaotic beauty. The city that had broken them, tested them, and ultimately forged them into something stronger. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly, tracing patterns on his chest. "The struggle, the simplicity, the threats and doubts and moments we almost lost each other?" Harry kissed her forehead, his smile genuine and untroubled, his eyes reflecting the city lights beginning to twinkle below. "Not for a single second. You gave me your empire when we met, but we built our kingdom together, and that makes all the difference." Their story, whispered across Lagos like a modern proverb, reminded everyone who heard it that love is not a transaction or convenience, integrity is not weakness to be exploited, and the greatest empire is one built on truth, partnership, and the courage to choose each other, again and again, through every storm that tests, but never breaks what's genuinely meant to last. If you loved Harry and Angeline's complete journey, like, subscribe, and share. Tell us in the comments, what would you sacrifice for true love? Where are you watching from? Drop your location below.